Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Let's start today's lecture. So today we are going to discuss about green chemistry and its 12 principles. And then we will discuss about the green nanotechnology. So what is green chemistry? Green chemistry could be defined as utilizing and implementing the chemistry in a way to reduce the negative impact on environments. So this means green chemistry would ultimately produce those chemicals that would not have much negative impact on the environment as the traditional chemicals have. So this means that green chemistry is trying to replace conventional chemistry in order to synthesize chemicals that would be less hazardous for the environment. Green chemistry has 12 principles. So now I'm going to discuss one by one these 12 principles of the green chemistry. Number one, prevention of waste. So there are two type of words. One is control of the waste and second is the prevention of the waste. So control of the waste is whenever the waste is produced in the environment or whenever the waste is accumulated in the environment, we are trying to then control the waste. While prevention means we do not allow the waste to be accumulated in the environment, right? So green chemistry tries to prevent the waste. We use such principles, we use such routes of producing the green chemicals in which most of the time the waste is prevented to be accumulated in the environment. So this is the first principle of the green chemistry. While second principle states that economy during the synthesis. So this is very important. Atom economy means that all of the reactants, all of the atoms of the reactants should be used in order to form the products. So this implies that none of the atoms should be wasted in the environment. None of the atoms should be discharged as a waste in the environment. All the atoms, we should devise such routes, we should devise such methods of the green in the green chemistry in order to produce the green chemicals, that all the atoms in a reaction should be consumed in order to produce the final products. So this is the second principle of the green chemistry. So what is the third principle? Third principle implies that less hazardous chemical synthesis. So this means that our procedure of the chemical synthesis, our procedure of the synthesis of the green chemicals should be such an efficient procedure that the less amount of hazardous materials should be discharged into the environment directly, or there should be less accumulation of the hazardous materials in the environment. So this principle is directly associated with using the efficient procedures, using the efficient routes of the synthesis of the green chemicals. Then there comes the fourth principle of the green chemistry that states that designing safer chemicals with less hazards. So there is a minute difference between the third principle of the green chemistry and the fourth principle of the green chemistry. Third principle states that the methods or the routes through which the chemicals are being produced, they should be such an efficient routes that there should be less accumulation of the hazardous materials in the environment. While in case of the fourth principle is associated with the chemicals, that once we have produced the chemicals using whatever means, uh, uh, using these green routes, so these chemicals should be of the nature that they should not be harmful for the environment. So third principle associate with the methods or the routes through which we are going to produce the green chemicals, while the fourth principle is directly linked to the chemicals that are being produced by using the green routes. So these chemicals should be of the nature, of such a nature that they should be less hazardous when they are in the environment. Now we come towards the fifth principle of the green chemistry. Fifth principle deals with the safer solvents and auxiliaries. So you are well aware of the fact that we use so many solvents in order to dissolve the chemicals, and we use so many extractants in order to extract the metabolites in chemical procedures. So once we have used these solvents and auxiliaries, so what we do that we then discharge these solvents and auxiliaries directly into the environments, right? So we should try to use in green chemistry. The fifth principle states that we should try to use the safer solvents and auxiliaries, so that whenever these solvents and extractants, after their use, they go into the environment, they should be safer for the environment. So this is the fifth principle of the green chemistry. So now, what is the sixth principle? Sixth principle is the design for energy efficiency. So this is very important principle. Design for energy efficiency. So you are well aware of the fact that energy is a problem throughout the world, and especially for the developing countries. And developing countries are always trying to find the sources of energy. So especially for the developing country, to develop the energy efficient procedures, to develop the energy efficient routes of synthesizing the chemicals is very important aspect, right? So we should, in green chemistry, we should develop such procedures of the chemical synthesis. We should develop such routes of the chemical synthesis that utilize optimum amount of energy rather than utilizing the uh, huge amount of energy. They should utilize the optimum amount of energy. Then there comes the seventh principle of the green chemistry. Seventh principle states that the use of renewable feedstocks. So this is very important, use of the renewable feedstock. So you are very well aware that most of the time in synthesizing the conventional chemicals, or in conventional chemistry, what happens that we most of the time use the non-renewable feedstocks, right? So when we use non-renewable feedstocks in order to synthesize the conventional chemicals, what happens that the non-renewable feedstocks have certain disadvantages associated with them. For example, they are costly as well, and they produce a huge amount of pollution directly to the environment. And at the same time, once they are consumed, they would be going to be they would be exhausted. So, so and there are so many other disadvantages also associated with non-renewable feedstocks. So in green chemistry, we always try to use the renewable feedstocks instead of the non-renewable feedstocks, right? So we use green feedstocks whose availability would be abundant as well, and at the same time they are also available throughout the year. Then there comes the eighth principle of the green chemistry. Eighth principle states that reduce derivatives during the synthesis process. So this implies that during the chemical synthesis process, we should avoid derivatization, because derivatization in a chemistry makes the synthesis process too long, and it would ultimately add further chemicals into the environment and cause the environmental pollution. So we should, in green chemistry, we should devise such routes, we should devise such procedures that ultimately reduce the derivatization process. So once the derivatization process is reduced, the ultimate chemical synthesis process would be, the length of the chemical synthesis process would be ultimately reduced, and there would be less amount of pollution that would be ultimately accumulated in the environment. And the ninth principle is catalysis. This is very important. Now, catalysis, catalyst is a molecule that is not directly consumed in chemical reactions. Rather, it speeds up the chemical reactions, right? So this is the definition of the catalyst. So we should use such catalysts because they are not consumed in chemical reactions. They might be accumulated ultimately into the environment. So we should use such catalysts that are ultimately not harmful for the environment. And as an example, uh, enzymes are those catalysts that are very safer ones, and they are called as biological catalysts. So catalysis should be very important in chemical reactions, and catalysis should be safer for the environment. Then the 10th principle of the green chemistry is the design for degradation, not for persistence. This is very important. Design for degradation. Now, we should design such chemicals in green chemistry, such molecules, such chemicals that should ultimately, after their use, or once we have we have made use of those chemicals, or once we have get all the benefits out of those chemicals, so what should ultimately happen, that those chemicals, once they are in environment, they should be degraded. They should not persist in the environment. This is the 10th principle. So we should design such chemicals that are, most of the time, that are degradable, and that should not persist in the environment, because if they persist in the environment, then this directly means that they would be ultimately causing the environmental pollution. So we should design for degradation, not for persistence. Now, the 11th principle of the green chemistry, 11th principle of the green chemistry states that real-time analysis for pollution control and prevention. So this means that we should, in green chemistry procedures, or in green chemistry routes, what should happen, that we should be able to monitor the pollution in a real-time manner, not at the end of the procedure. We should be able to monitor the pollution at a real time, at a specific time, so that we should be able to monitor the pollution from time to time, in order to avoid the negative impact that might come at the end of the procedure, right? So the procedures that are being run through the green chemistry routes should be able to monitor the real-time analysis of the pollution. Then the last principle of the green chemistry is inherently safer chemistry for accident prevention. So you are well aware of the fact that accidents, while you are working in laboratory, or you are working in the industry, accidents are the routine procedures. So there might be the chances of accidents that may happen. So our routes of the synthesis of the chemicals, or our routes of our procedures of the chemical synthesis in green chemistry, should be able to avoid those accidents. So we should we should design such routes, we should design such procedures that should not that should have very little chances of the accidents. This is the 12th principle of the green chemistry. So this is about green chemistry and its 12 principles. And the purpose to teach you about green chemistry and its principle is actually to link green chemistry and its principle to the green nanotechnology. Right? Now we are coming towards the green nanotechnology. Now, what is green nanotechnology? Green nanotechnology refers to the use of nanotechnology to enhance the environmental sustainability of processes currently producing negative externalities. So in simple terms, you can say that in green chemistry, what happens, that we are producing the same chemicals, but with a bit different procedures, by adopting the green procedures. And in green nanotechnology, what we do, that we are trying to design the same nanomaterials, the same nanoproducts, but by adopting the different routes, by adopting the green methods, so that the ultimate nanomaterials that we are going to produce through green nanotechnology would be much safer for the environment as compared to the conventional nanomaterials, right? This is green nanotechnology. So once you compare the green nanotechnology with the conventional nanotechnology, the only difference that comes into your mind is the products of the green chemistry or the products of the green nanotechnology should be designed through such routes, or by adopting such procedures that the ultimate products should be safer for the environment. This is the real concept. Now, the aim of the green nanotechnology is to minimize potential environmental and human health risks associated with the manufacture and use of the nanotechnology products. So this means that we should the ultimate products of the green nanotechnology that are coming should be safer for the environment, and they should not be harmful for the environment as well as for the human beings. And at the same time, this green nanotechnology should also avoid the existing products with the nano products that are more environment friendly throughout their life cycle. So this is another aim. Another aim is to develop the existing products in such an alternative fashion that the ultimate product should be safer for the environment. Then certainly green nanotechnology would have some advantages over the conventional nanotechnology. And what are those advantages? Now we are going to discuss these advantages of the green nanotechnology. Number one, increased energy efficiency. So this is exactly like we have already discussed in case of the green chemistry, that our procedures of the green nanotechnology should be energy efficient. And this is very important because energy is a problem for the world. We should save our energy. We should develop such procedures that promises or that ensures the efficiency of the energy. So green nanotechnology promises the energy efficient procedures as compared to the conventional nanotechnology. Number one. Number two, reduced waste production. So what green nanotechnology promises is it's a green nanotechnology offers you reduced waste production as compared to the conventional nanotechnology. In conventional nanotechnology, where we use the non-renewable resources, so there are chances of greater production of the waste materials. While in case of green nanotechnology, what happens that the ultimate procedure would have less production of the waste. Number third, no emission of the greenhouse gases. So you are well aware about the greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are those gases that ultimately, once they are in the atmosphere, they absorb the radiant energy, and they would ultimately emit the radiant energy, and they would cause the greenhouse effect. And that directly links to the global warming, right? For example, methane, carbon dioxide, and ozone, and water vapors as well, and nitrous oxide as well. All of these gases are the greenhouse gases. So once the concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere would be greater, this would be very, harmful for the environment, because they would ultimately, they would absorb the radiant energy, and they would emit the radiant energy, and they would cause the greenhouse effect. So our procedures of the green nanotechnology, they ensures less or no emission of the greenhouse gases, as compared to the conventional nanotechnology, where there is a greater amount of the greenhouse gases ultimately produced, and uh, they cause the greenhouse effect. So this is an advantage of the green nanotechnology over the conventional nanotechnology. Then number four, decreased consumption of non-renewable raw materials. So this is very important. What happens that in case of the conventional nanotechnology, what we use there, we most of the time use non-renewable raw materials, right? Non-renewable raw materials like fossil fuels. So cost of the fossil fuels is also a disadvantage, and once they are used, they would also they would also emit the greenhouse gases. This is also a problem. But in green nanotechnology, we try to consume very little amount of we try to consume very little amount of non-renewable. So we mostly depend on renewable raw materials. We mostly depend on renewable feedstocks in green nanotechnology. This is an advantage. Okay, now I'm going to discuss about how we can produce these green nanomaterials. So we have already discussed about the the synthesis methods of the conventional nanomaterials, right? For example, there are many methods, laser-based methods or heat-based methods. So you can produce the chemical nanomaterials by several other methods, and you have already learned about those methods. But in this slide, we are going to discuss the green route. What is the how we can produce nano products or how we can produce nanomaterials through green methods. So there are some steps that should be that you should be very well aware of. So what are those steps? Number one, we should select a source, and that source should be renewable. For example, we can produce these green nanomaterials from fungi, from algae, from plants, from yeast, from bacteria. And if you look at these sources, all of these sources are renewable sources. They are not non-renewable sources. Number one step. So your source of producing the, you know, your source of producing the green nanomaterials should be renewable. Then at number two step, what we do is we extract from these sources. We extract the metabolites out of the cells of these sources. So we can adopt any of the extraction procedures, and you have already aware of many extraction procedures. You can extract from water, you can extract by ethanol, methanol, and there are several extractants available um, uh, from by which you can extract the metabolites out of these materials. So number two step is the extraction. So once the metabolites are extracted out of these renewable sources, these metabolites would be in a flask now. And these metabolites may be alkaloids, maybe terpenoids, maybe phenolics, maybe proteins, maybe vitamins, sugars, coenzymes, conones, and maybe nitrate reductase enzyme as well. So these might be the metabolites that you extract by using different extraction procedures out of these sources. So in the third step, what you do that you select a material from which you are going to produce the nanoparticles. For example, if you want to produce silver nanoparticles, you need to have a salt of the silver. You need to have a silver salt. And here, if you look at this picture, you can see silver nitrate salt, right? So we have an extract in this flask. We now make the solution of the silver nitrate in exact volume. So equal volume of silver nitrate solution should be added in the equal volume of the extract out of these materials. So once the silver nitrate solution is added in this extract, what happens that the silver ions in the solution would then be reduced by the functional groups attached with these metabolites, right? So once this reduction process occurs, what happens that the silver ion would ultimately be reduced into the zero valent silver, and that would ultimately form the nanoparticles. So this is the procedure of the green synthesis of nanoparticles, and this I have conveyed this procedure by adopting a simple example of the silver nitrate. You can also use many other salts, many other materials in order to synthesize the nanomaterials of many other salts as well. But the procedure would be more or less similar. Now, in this slide, if you look at this slide describes the applications of the green nanotechnology, and you are well aware of the fact that there are so many applications of the green nanomaterials. In fact, all those applications where we can apply the conventional chemically produced nanomaterials, we can also apply the green nanomaterials in the same applications, right? For example, we can apply these nanomaterials in the biotechnological procedures in order to increase the agricultural production, in the medicine, in order to diagnose the diseases, in order to treat the diseases. In the textile industry, we can also use these green nanoparticles. And we can also use in food industry, food packaging, food preservations, and so many other applications. And we can also use these green nanomaterials as energy, in order to store energy, and in order to, and as sensors in the environment, in order to treat the many pollutants in the environment. And we can also use these green nanomaterials in the wastewater treatment. So briefly, there are so many applications of the green nanomaterials, and these applications are exactly those applications that we can that we can obtain by using the conventional chemically produced nanomaterials. Then these are 2 or 3 slides from my own research. We also my research is also focusing on production of the green nanomaterials and their application. So here in this slide, you see that we applied the silver nanoparticles after the synthesis against 2 pathogens as antimicrobial agents, and these pathogens were Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli. So what we did is, if you look at this petri dish, in this well, there is no nanoparticle application. Then we applied 5 microgram per ml, 10 microgram per ml, 15 microgram per ml, and 20 microgram per ml concentration of the nanoparticles. So if you can look at this petri dish, you see that there is no inhibition zone synthesis here in control, where no nanoparticles were applied. But in case of the application of nanoparticles, and in case of the increase of the concentration of the nanoparticles, what happens that the zone of inhibition would be increased. There would be a greater zone of inhibition in case of the increased concentration of the nanoparticles, right? So these results were represented in these 2 graphs. I mean, in this graph, if you see, if you look at this graph, while applying in control, there is no zone of inhibition, while whenever the concentration of the nanoparticles increase, there would be a greater zone of inhibition, and that is represented by these bars. While in this experiments, we applied the same concentrations of these nanoparticles in microtiter plate in order to measure the population density of the these pathogens. So what happens that as the concentrations of the nanoparticles are increased, the population density of the pathogens decreased. So this also means that there is an antimicrobial activity of these green nanoparticles. And in this slide, this is also our research. And this slide, you see that if you look at this picture, these are exactly the same results as we have already discussed in the previous slide, but these results are obtained against a different pathogen. And this pathogen was a plant pathogen, Xanthomonas oryzae pathovar oryzae, and this is a rice pathogen. So these were the same results. I think there is no need to explain these. And in this slide, here you see that we also applied these nanoparticles in our laboratory as degradation for the degradation of the azo dyes. And these are the textile dyes being used in the textile industry for various, in order to give the color to the fabrics. So what we did is we applied these nanoparticles, and what these nanoparticles did is, as the time increased, the color removal is increased, and this means that the degradation efficiency of the this is directly linked to the degradation efficiency of the nanoparticles with the textile dyes. So they also have the ability to degrade the textile dyes with the passage of time. Then this is the last slide of the today's lecture, and this is about the toxicity of the green nanomaterials. And so although when we compare the green nanomaterials with the conventional chemically produced nanomaterials, we can say that the toxicity of the green nanomaterials would be much lesser as compared to the conventional chemical nanomaterials. But at the same time, nanomaterials are not toxicity free. They ultimately would have some toxicity. So once they cause toxicity, what is the need is that we should assess the toxicity of the nanomaterials, right? So there should be an assessment of the toxicity of the nanomaterials, And once the toxicity is assessed, this toxicity should be characterized. Characterization means that where this toxicity is ultimately going to cause the damage, and we should completely characterize the toxicity, its extent and its location and so many other things. And then once the toxicity is characterized, then we can prevent and we can manage the risk that is associated with the toxicity of the green nanomaterials. So students, thank you so much for today's lecture. This is all about today's lecture. And now if you have some question, you can